Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchist Ted.
This is how we roll. We're talking about party rolls and how you use them. We want to start this video by thanking our sponsor, Easy Roller Dice, for all your dice rolling needs. Whether it's your first set of dice or your 1 millionth set of dice, Easy Roller Dice. In the description below, you can find a link as well as a one-time coupon code. That link is going to be easyrollerdice.com/nerdarchy. Go get your Easy Roller Dice.
All right, so today we're going to talk about the typical roles in an RPG party, and some of these things were kind of developed, or started being used in video games, and they've kind of carried over into the tabletop.
Yeah, I would say they went from tabletop to video games, and then reluctantly back to tabletop. And not only are we going to discuss them, but we're going to actually discuss them, how they actually affect your role playing in the game and how you can define your characters with these roles if you're using roles and you feel they're important to you.
Right. So we have the tank. This is the guy who takes the damage. You have your striker or deep.
So the tank, right? It's a tank now, but I think we called him something else when we first started this game. Way back when, we always just called him your wall or your meat shield.
Your meat shield, that's what I remember.
Yes.
You have your striker, or other people call it a DPS, and this is the guy who's doing the damage.
And back in the day, it was like you always needed your rogue, so the sneaky guy.
You got your rogue or your barbarian. They always hit hard. You have your controller. This is your mage. He's going to affect the battlefield in a lot of different ways.
And then finally, that brings us to either your healer or your leader type role. 4th edition dubbed it leader. Maybe some video games call them leaders as well. That terminology is a bit newer to me. But again, when we originally started playing D&D, you needed a fighter, you needed a rogue. Well, no, it wasn't a rogue. We didn't have those yet.
Yeah, thief.
We had a thief, and you needed a cleric. So, and then you needed your wizard. So you had all your roles of the party covered before we even considered the fact that there were roles. Intuitively, the way the game was played, that's how it went. Then, video games come along and they actually define everything. They're coders. That's what they do.
Well, we've been gaming together about 20 years, and we both gamed prior to that. And I still, get into a group here or there, and there's still people that are like, oh, well, do we have the roles covered? Gotta make sure you've got all the slots filled. And I'm like, why?
And that being said, we as a group don't really care about that, but we want to take another look at it and a way to make it interesting. And we're not opposed to it either. And not only that, we don't care if people build their characters mechanically or from a story. We actually believe you can do both.
Well, all this video is designed to do is to talk about, once you've made that choice of filling that role, how can you role play that differently?
What kind of flesh out the character?
What kind of choices can you make that's going to be differently? Let's look at the tank as an example. Are you the tank because you love the thrill of combat and you can't wait to rush out there and be the one to get into it? Or are you reluctant? Are you more the cavalier from the D&D cartoon who's like, you do it.
I don't want to tank. You tank. Well, yeah, really the roles can inform your personality in the sense that if you are playing the reluctant fighter, right, and you're not really interested in being in the thick of things and in combat, that would be very much playing against type, and that starts to inform your character and his or her personality.
And while you're building that mechanically, you can make choices on where your stats are, what skills to take, what background choice you're going to have, because that's all going to have been built upon this idea that, okay, well, I know how to do it, I just don't want to do it.
Right. Feats as well. Maybe you take the mobility feat because you want to move around more. You hit people and then you move away from them so they don't get their attack of opportunity. And you're actually like the anti-tank because you're not doing your job, even though that's the role he was built from. But the other side of that is, what if you're playing that role and the reason why your character fills that role in the party is because he's very compassionate. He cares about others. If they're hitting me, they're not hitting you. He's naturally a defender. He wants to protect other people.
So this is really good for, a paladin or a fighter that's picking up a shield and is like, going back to that term you talked about, the wall. I'm gonna get in there and I'm gonna put this out, and I'm gonna get up in all these guys' faces, and if I fall, it means you've had longer to live or longer to run away. I'll fall first because I care that much about those I travel with.
Yeah, and oddly enough, too, when you have a character like the Barbarian that can actually be a tank, or he could be your striker or DPS if you wanted to, he could fill both of those roles, and he would very much strikes me as the action junkie.
Yes.
Or the battle master who is very strategic and has a military mind, but he leads from the front. Like he inspires the troops by being up there and engaging the enemy.
So like if you get into your striker role, here's where, okay, well, are you cool and calculated? Do you take your time to throw that strike or loose that arrow at just the right moment? And that's why you're getting that sneak attack, or that's why you're attacking from the shadows, or are you doing it in haste and you're just really lucky? There's lots of different ways to to play that off.
Well, yeah, when you say that, I think that's a funny idea. Like you play the rogue, which I mean, usually this character is going to be the rogue. Maybe the ranger could get in there as well. They've been able to pack on some damage as well, or the barbarian. But like, I like the idea of the rogue with sneak attack, but it's not because he's really good at it. He's just like he always manages to land a lucky shot every round. And maybe that informs his personality. Maybe he's happy-go-lucky. He's got the lucky feet. He's a halfling. He rerolls ones. He's got not a care in the world. It's just like he walks down the street and things just go his way. Oh, look, here's a coin. Bends over, picks it up, and something goes flying by where his face was. You could do a lot of fun things with that and play with that trope a little bit.
And here's where you would be able to, if you really wanted to step into that lucky angle of it, is if you're playing in a game where your DM is really allowing agency, you could have that. It's like, oh, well, I bend down to pick up a shiny rock. And this way you're not trying to game the system by I found a gold piece. And that's when something happens. Or, you stop. And, when the DM says like, okay, well, there's a trap that's going off. And, well, it's going to hit the other guy first. You're not avoiding the damage, but it hits the dude next to you first. And, oh, I'm sorry, I missed it,
Yeah. Yeah, or maybe you play a ranger and he's cold and calculating, like you said. He's there with his bow and he's rolling a d6 and 2d8 every round, pretty much, when he makes his attacks. So he's doing a lot of damage on a regular basis, and he's just constantly waiting. He's like a predator, waiting to pounce. And he lets the tank do his job and get up in front. And while the enemies are paying attention to that, he hits them hard.
Yeah, the arrows are going over the tank's shoulders and annihilating the enemies in front of them.
And and maybe that informs how you play him as well. Like he is the guy that sits in the tavern with his back in the corner. He always wants the dark spot. He always wants a wall to his back. He wants to know where all the exits and entrances are.
He's drinking the water, not the mead, because he's got to be clear-headed and clear thinking at all times.
Yeah, he's sharp in everything he does. Yeah, and those are just two examples. So then go into our controller. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, the wizard has always been, the master of lore and, the purveyor of power. So, what does that mean? Are you incredibly studied? Is there a reason you didn't take the sage background? How did you come upon all of this magical might? Now, you might go sorcerer, and that fills the same role.
Or druid.
And each of these is a completely separate choice. If you go sorcerer, you could literally have just been born to power. So did you squander, years away, sitting with your feet up, or as soon as you got power, did you get in there and use it? Which means you could be incredibly younger than some of your adventuring companions. Are you older and you came into your power much later in life, by some kind of freak accident, or you finally came upon the right formula of right place, right time, and your powers of the storm have unlocked because you were on a mountaintop and struck by lightning, and all of these things dictate where you're going to be and what you're going to do and how you play your character.
You might be a wizard that's a battle mage, and you may actually be similar to that tactician warrior we talked about, or that cold and calculating ranger we talked about, where you survey the battlefield, but you from a safe distance, and you pick and choose where you're most effective and how to control everything you see before you, right? Maybe that carries on over to other aspects of their life. They're very type A personality, very controlling, very dominant. Always want to have the answer. Always want to be in control of things. Maybe they forces them into, not forces them, but they assume the reins of party leader, and they want to be in charge because they just know everything is better when they control it.
And you can go even further. When you get into your subclasses, these things are really going to be able to dictate different things. If you're playing an illusionist, well, that means you might really care about manipulating the things that are around there. Maybe you're a trickster. Very different things. You can play an illusionist who is about deceiving the enemy, but you're not into practical jokes. Or you could really be in the, okay, well, I'm gonna make this encounter harder for my party because this is just gonna be funny.
Well, yeah, you could literally be the party clown, as well with the illusionist, because it's just that's your personality. You're fun, you're jovial. Sure, you have the ability to control the battlefield because you manipulate what everyone perceives. For you, it's fun, and you're the class clown. It's just another way to play that character.
If you go with the Invoker and you eventually have the ability to sculpt the battlefield, you can be like, okay, well, I'm gonna bounce my fireball this way so that you two who are gonna be in the thick of it will be fine, and everybody else around you gets nuked. So like. You can describe. It doesn't change the mechanics of how you put your template out there and how the spell works. You have the ability to say those spots don't take damage because I have this power. Have fun with it. Describe why that is. Oh well, I use the rock here to bounce the fire that way, and I use that thing there so that my companions are safe, and it's because of my superiority with magic.
It could be, or maybe they just have a really keen analytical mind, and maybe they're like a mathematician, right?
Mm.
So that and you can take those little elements from the class that really makes them good controllers, and define their personality that way, and be like, well, this is why, and this is how it affects how this character interacts with the world around them.
So then we move on to our leader, our healer, the one who's known to stitch up the people, care about the wounded, and be out there up front talking to the masses.
So this one kind of runs a wide gambit, right? Because you have clerics, you have druids, and you have paladins. They're all really good at healing.
Sometimes your bard fits into this as well.
Bard as well, and sorcerer. If you go favorite soul, divine soul, whatever
Right.
it is these days, you have the ability to heal. And then, so what does that really mean? Are you like a hardened army doctor that's just seen a lot of conflict, and you just go about putting people back together? They're not even really people to you. That it's just a job that you do. You're stitching, you're sewing, you're curing.
You focus on the small to be like, okay, there's not a whole lot of blood here. I'm just stitching this up. This guy's going to survive.
Well, maybe you don't even care. Like, these are just hunks of meat that you manipulate and put back together. It's just your job. It's another day at the office.
Well, I was thinking from the other angle, like you get queasy out around the blood, and you've got the skill, but you've never really enjoyed it, and it's like, oh god, this guy's life is in the balance, and it's up to me. I got to do this. I got to do that.
Well, that would be another way of playing it. It's a little bit against type. Is like you're kind of a neurotic healer, or the other way, like totally in trope, would be your character's very kind and compassionate. Maybe even like, was it Bethany from the Nodwick cartoons with the duct tape, always duct taping them back together?
Yeah. I was thinking, I know we use Dresden Files so often, but Butters, he does not like working on living people. He's like, that's why he's a mortician, because he doesn't do well with the blood.
Yeah, so like there's definitely different ways of doing that, and that's like from a cleric angle. The paladin is also kind of a defender as well. It's your tank, but he can act as the leader or the healer. He can be very kind and compassionate and just want to help other people. And so he kind of fits both roles fairly well. He's got spells, he's got lay on hands, but then the question is to determine how that affects him. Maybe he is actually like the unwilling tank when it comes to that role, because he is more compassionate. He doesn't really like inflicting harm and doing damage to people. Maybe you play this one that he only smites if he absolutely needs to, and holds them in reserve for only the worst of fiends and villains. You could do things with your druid. The druid may actually not even want to heal your party, even though he's the healer. He may be like, "Oh, the horse has been hurt. Let me handle it." Like he's totally a veterinarian instead. Like, and somehow he ends up with the adventuring party, and he's like, "Oh, I'm not used to working on people. You're put together weird. You got arms and all these limbs.
There's not enough legs." Or maybe your druid is circle of the moon, and he's like, "No, I don't have spells. That spell's to heal me while I'm in wild shape."
Well, yeah, but then you're a tank and not a leader,
Not a leader.
for sure. So there's definitely different ways that you can play that role, and that's going to inform your character's personality.
So you take the concept of who this thing is, you look at where your stats are, because they're gonna help you in form of what you are. You're gonna take your background, you're gonna look at your subclass, and all of these things, they're a piece of the puzzle. They're a piece of your pie of who your character is, and everything, all those choices that you have made mechanically to put on that character sheet, they all mean something to who that character is, what that character's personality is, and use those things.
Yeah, essentially, the starting point is kind of like decide how important the role that the character's going to fill is going to be to the personality, and you can decide if you're going to go against type or double down or somewhere's in the middle. But it gives you a starting point for figuring out what your character is going to be like.
If you guys want to continue the conversation down in the comments below, while you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Don't forget, on your way down to the comments in the description, there's that link and that 20% one-time coupon code to Easy Roller Dice.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.